You did what to the Krasner flagship Admiral Zezalar's upper appendages trembled with what could only be described as sheer horror. All four of his eye stalks extended to their full length as he stared at the human ambassador Lieutenant Commander. Natalie Brooks shrugged, taking another sip of her coffee, a substance the Galactic Coalition had almost classified as a controlled psychoactive when they first encountered humans. We blew it up. Yes, I gathered that much, the Admiral's voice modulator clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in Vornian physiology. What I'm struggling to comprehend is why you felt it necessary to use a Nova-class torpedo on a vessel that was already disabled and attempting to surrender. Natalie paused mid-sip. They were surrendering. Their communications array was broadcasting the universal surrender frequency for 37 standard time units before you. Before you? The Admiral couldn't even finish the sentence, Natalie set down her mug on the conference table that explains the weird blinking lights. We thought they were charging their main cannon. The three other alien representatives at the emergency council meeting exchanged what humans might recognize as alarmed glances, despite their vastly different facial structures. Commander Brooks began Taxiel, the Meraxian diplomat, whose translucent skin allowed everyone to literally see his rising blood pressure. Perhaps you could help us understand the human concept of proportional response. Natalie tilted her head. Proportional what now? And that was the moment the Galactic Coalition realized they had a problem. Captain Emil Kovacs stared at the holographic display, watching the recording for the third time as the Krasner flagship exploded into a miniature sun that briefly outshone the actual star. It had been orbiting. Damn. He whispered, a smile tugging at his lips before he caught himself. He was in trouble. Serious trouble. So why did he feel like high-fiving someone? The door to his quarters hissed open, and Lieutenant Commander Brooks strode in, looking surprisingly unruffled for someone who had just faced the wrath of the Coalition's highest-ranking officials. How bad? Emil asked, shutting off the display on a scale of 1 to 10. Natalie grabbed a chair, spun it around, and straddled it backward about a 17. And that's just because most of the diplomatic corps are too terrified to give us a higher number. So they're mad. No, mad is what my ex got when I sold his vintage guitar collection to fund my academy application. The Coalition is... She gestured vaguely with both hands. They're having an existential crisis. Emil rubbed his temples. Because we destroyed one warship, because we obliterated a surrendering vessel with enough firepower to crack a small moon. Apparently that's not how things are done out here in the civilized galaxy. Natalie's air quotes around civilized were practically audible. The Krasner weren't exactly civilized when they glassed. New Perth colony last month? That's what I said. Natalie slapped her hand on his desk. But get this, the Coalition seems to think there's supposed to be some kind of, I don't know, galactic gentleman's agreement about warfare. You blow up a colony, I blow up a colony. You shoot down a frigate, I shoot down a frigate. It's like they're playing chess while we're flipping the board and setting the pieces on fire. Emil leaned back in his chair, his expression growing more serious. So what happens now? Well, the good news is the Krasner have suddenly become very interested in peace talks. And the bad news? Natalie's smile was sharp enough to cut. We've been formally invited to a galactic summit to discuss humanity's integration into the accepted protocols of interstellar conflict, which is diplomat speak for what the hell is wrong with you apes? When do we leave? 6 hours. And Captain Admiral Jew says to leave the Nova-class torpedoes at home. Apparently they give the ambassadors anxiety. Emil snorted. Any other restrictions? Just one under. No circumstances are we to use the phrase go big or go home during the negotiations. That's oddly specific. I may have said it repeatedly during my explanation of human military doctrine. Emil sighed. It was going to be a long summit. The Galactic Summit was held on Neutralis, a perfectly terraformed world that served as the Coalition's primary diplomatic hub. Its carefully cultivated gardens and mathematically precise architecture screamed, "We have evolved beyond your primitive conflicts in a way that made most humans want to track mud through the hallways on principle." Emil and Natalie. along with a small delegation of Earth's diplomatic corps and military advisors, were led into a vast chamber. The room was arranged in a perfect circle with representatives from 57 species, seated according to their time of admission to the Coalition. Humanity's seats were right by the door. The message wasn't subtle. High Chancellor Orm Vidra, a being composed primarily of crystalline structures that shifted color with her moods, currently a troubled amber rose from the central podium. We welcome our human colleagues to this extraordinary session of the Galactic Coalition. She began, her voice resonating through the chamber without any apparent amplification. The recent incident between human forces and the Kresnar Dominion has raised concerns that must be addressed with utmost urgency. Emil leaned toward Dr. Thomas Alvarez. Earth's leading xenosciologist, is it just me? Or did everyone inch away from us when we sat down? It's not just you, Thomas whispered back. The Aerodani delegate is literally hiding behind his environmental suit controls, and those guys evolved as apex predators. Natalie suppressed a snort. Maybe he's just cold. He's a methane-breathing life form who considers lava a refreshing dip, Thomas replied dryly. Chancellor Ormidra's crystals flashed in annoyed blue. If the human delegation could give us their full attention? Apologies, Chancellor Emil said smoothly. We're still adapting to the honor of being in such distinguished company. The Chancellor's color shifted back to amber, understandable now regarding the incident with the Kresnar. Vessel the one that was part of a fleet that wiped out 20,000 colonists on New Perth, Natalie interjected. Ignoring Emil's warning glance, an uncomfortable ripple passed through the chamber. Yes, well, the Chancellor continued, the Coalition recognizes that the Kresnar incursion into human space was a serious violation of our charter. However, the response has been deemed disproportionate. Emil echoed his diplomatic facade, slipping just a fraction. Chancellor with all due respect. The Kresnar have been attacking human colonies for months. They refused all attempts at communication. They ignored formal warnings from both Earth Command and the Coalition itself. This is true, acknowledged Tron, the Valerian representative, whose species resembled nothing so much as sentient clouds of vapor. However, there are established protocols for escalation of force. The deployment of a Nova-class weapon against a disabled vessel is unprecedented in the last 7 millennia of Coalition history. Natalie leaned forward. So what would you have done? The question seemed to catch the chamber off guard. Pardon, asked Tron, his vapor condensing slightly in what might have been confusion. What would the Coalition have done in our position? The Kresnar had already destroyed one colony and were moving toward another. Their technology jammed our long-range communications. We had one ship against their fleet of 7. Standard protocol would be to disable their propulsion, and weapon systems then call for Coalition peacekeeping forces, explained a reptilian delegate from the far side of the chamber. Emil couldn't help himself, and how long would that take? Hours. Days. Meanwhile, another human colony gets proportionately wiped out. The Chancellor's crystals darkened. Captain Kovacs, your frustration is understandable. But no, I don't think you do understand. Emil interrupted, standing from his seat. Humanity has been fighting itself for thousands of years. We've gotten very, very good at it. And one thing we've learned is that sometimes the best way to prevent a prolonged conflict is to demonstrate clearly and unambiguously the cost of continuing to fight by annihilating an enemy with excessive force, asked Chancellor Orm Vedra, her crystals now pulsing with concerned red streaks. The concept of excessive force is culturally relative, Chancellor Dr. Alvarez chimed in his academic tone, providing a momentary buffer to the tension. Humans don't actually have a word that directly translates to your concept of overkill. This was not strictly true, and Natalie had to bite the inside of her cheek. To keep from laughing, Thomas was playing the mysterious human customs card and playing it beautifully. Surely that cannot be accurate, said the Meraxian diplomat Pluxil. Your species has developed nuclear weapons, antimatter containment, and now Nova class. Torpedoes, you must understand the concept of using more force than necessary. Oh, we understand using enough force to get the job done. Natalie replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes but more than necessary. That implies there's an upper limit to necessary in the first place. The silence that followed was deafening during a recess in the summit. Proceedings, Emil found himself in one of Neutralis's famous floating gardens, admiring the impossible physics of water flowing upward. Through transparent tubes to nourish hanging plants, he was trying to clear his head when he sensed someone approach. "Your species continues to confound our behavioral predictions," came a melodic voice. Emil turned to find himself face to whatever counted as a face with Xanthal, the representative of the HFY collective. The HFY were among the oldest species in the coalition, mysterious beings who appeared as shifting patterns of light contained within robes of an impossibly black material. Ambassador Xanthal Emil acknowledged with a respectful nod. "I wasn't aware that your people took an interest in human affairs. We take an interest in anomalies, Captain Kovacs, and humans are nothing if not anomalous." Emil chuckled. "We get that a lot. I imagine you do. The patterns of light shifted into what might have been a contemplative configuration. Your Lieutenant Commander Brooks made an interesting point during today's session. The concept of necessary force is indeed culturally relative. And what do the HFY consider necessary force? We haven't engaged in physical conflict for over 20,000 of your years," Xanthal replied. "We found other methods of resolution more efficient." "Lucky you," Emil said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from his voice. "Humanity hasn't had that luxury." "No, you haven't." Xanthal's lights pulsed thoughtfully. "Your species evolved on a world of scarce resources and numerous predators. Your history is written in blood and fire, and yet here you are among the stars still carrying those ancient adaptations for a world that no longer exists." Emil frowned with all due respect. "Ambassador, those ancient adaptations are the reason we survived the Kressner attack. Indeed, and perhaps that is precisely why the Coalition finds you so disturbing. Because we defended ourselves, because you did not merely defend yourselves, Captain. You sent a message, a very loud, very bright message that burned with the heat of a small star." Xanthal's lights sparkled in what Emil somehow knew was amusement. "The Coalition species have spent millennia developing protocols, establishing boundaries, creating a civilization where conflicts are managed rather than won, and along come the humans blowing things up precisely. You do not play by rules you never agreed to in the first place." The HFY's lights formed a complex. "It is refreshing in its way." Emil raised an eyebrow. "You approve?" "I did not say that, but I understand. The HFY were once much like humans, quick to anger, quicker to act. We learned over time that there are more paths than the direct one we're capable of. Diplomacy." Emil pointed out. "We just don't start with it when our people are being killed." A fair position, though. Though I suspect the real issue troubling the Coalition is not what you did, but what you might do next. Xanthal's lights dimmed slightly. A species that responds to one attack with such decisiveness, what might they do if, truly threatened? How far would humans go to survive? The question hung in the air between them, and Emil had no good answer. Meanwhile, Natalie had found her way to what passed for a bar on Neutralis, a serene space where various beings sat on meditation cushions, while servers brought them beverages that allegedly altered consciousness in spiritually enlightening ways. Natalie had asked for whiskey. She received something that tasted like mint-flavored gasoline and made her left ear go numb. She was on her second glass. "Is this seat taken?" asked a gravelly voice. She looked up to find a Kressner standing beside her cushion. Her hand instinctively moved to where her sidearm would have been had weapons been allowed on Neutralis. "You've got some nerve," she said, not bothering to hide her hostility. The Kressner, a tall exoskeletal being with 4 arms and compound eyes that glittered like oil on water, made a gesture that might have been conciliatory. "I am Vera, Science Overseer for the Kressner Dominion. I am not military. That's supposed to make me feel better about the 20,000 humans your people killed. No! The Kresnar sank onto a cushion. Joints clicking. Nothing could or should I came to understand? Natalie snorted. Understand what? How to better target human colonies next time to understand why your species responded as you did, the military command. Expected you to retreat to call for help from your allies? Instead, you deployed a weapon that our scientists believed was theoretical. Vractor's mandibles clicked together. A weapon that, had it been deployed closer to a planetary body, could have caused an extinction-level event. Yeah, well, we read the manual before we fired it. Natalie took another sip of her not whiskey just far. Enough to make our point without cracking any planets. See, we can be restrained. That is what troubles us. You knew exactly what you were doing. Of course we did. What did you think, we just fire off super weapons at random? In some ways that would be less concerning. Vera's compound eyes fixed on her random destruction. Can be predicted statistically calculated destruction with such precision suggests a species that has made an art form of violence. Natalie laughed a sharp sound that turned heads throughout the bar. An art form of violence that's rich coming from a Kresnar? Your people attacked us without provocation? That was a mistake? No kidding, no. You misunderstand. Vractor leaned closer, his voice dropping. The military command attacked because they believed humans would be easy to subjugate based on coalition reports of your technological development. They expected you to follow the same protocols of engagement that the rest of the galactic community observes. Seems like a pretty basic research failure on your part indeed. We did not study your history deeply enough. We did not understand that humans developed their technology primarily through warfare rather than cooperation. We did not realize that every human vessel is, in essence, a warship that sometimes performs other functions. Natalie considered this. So what are you saying? I am saying that the Kresnar Dominion will be formally apologizing to humanity tomorrow and offering significant reparations. Vera's mandibles twitched in what might have been embarrassment. And I am personally saying that I hope never to see what humans consider to be actual warfare as opposed to a single demonstration. Natalie smiled, cold and sharp. That's probably wise. The day's session of the summit was considerably more subdued. The Kresnar delegation formally apologized for the attack on New Perth colony, offering both material reparations and territorial concessions that left many coalition members murmuring in surprise. Chancellor Orm Vadra, her crystals, now a thoughtful green, addressed the chamber in light of these developments. The coalition must consider its position regarding humanity's place among us, while the response to the Kresnar incursion was unorthodox by our standards. It has resulted in a swift resolution to a conflict that might otherwise have escalated. Emil stood. Chancellor, if I may. She nodded, crystals flickering curiously. Humanity acknowledges that our methods may seem extreme to many coalition species. We come from a world where hesitation often meant extinction, but we're not just our past. We're also our aspirations for the future. If the coalition is willing to work with us, I believe we can find a middle path that respects both your protocols and our need to protect our people. The Chancellor's crystals brightened. A reasonable proposal. What would you suggest? A cultural exchange program? Coalition observers on human vessels? Human observers on coalition peacekeeping missions. We learn your ways, you learn ours, and maybe we find something better than either of us had before. The proposal sparked a flurry of discussion throughout the chamber. Eventually, after consultations with various delegation heads, Chancellor Orm Vadra returned to the center podium. The coalition accepts this proposal in principle, with details to be determined by a joint committee. We also propose an additional measure that humanity take responsibility for responding to situations where decisive action may be required to prevent greater harm. Emil blinked in surprise. You want us to be your enforcers? The Chancellor's crystals shifted to a diplomatic blue. We prefer the term rapid response specialists. The coalition has maintained peace for millennia, but we have done so primarily through consensus and negotiation. Recent events suggest that not all species respond to such methods. Natalie leaned toward Emil. They're scared of us, so they're putting us on their side. Smart indeed, murmured Dr. Alvarez's classic incorporation of a potential threat into the power structure. Chancellor Orm Vedra continued this arrangement would be mutually beneficial. The coalition gains a deterrent against aggressors, while humanity gains allies technology and a framework for interstellar relations. Emil stood Chancellor. The human delegation will need to consult with our government, but speaking personally, I believe this could be the beginning of a productive relationship. As the session concluded, Emil found Ambassador Xanthal waiting near the human delegation's exit. A clever resolution, Captain, the HFY said, lights dancing. Though I wonder if the coalition fully understands what they've just done. And what's that? They've legitimized human methods while simultaneously trying to constrain them. I am curious to see which influence proves stronger over time. Emil smiled. That makes two of us, Ambassador. 6 months later, the UNC Vigilant hung in orbit above Earth, its newly expanded hull incorporating both human and coalition technology on the observation deck. Captain Emil Kovacs and Lieutenant Commander Natalie Brooks stood side by side watching a delegation of coalition representatives board via shuttle ready for our first joint mission, Emil asked. As ready as our guests are going to let us be, Natalie replied, gesturing to the ship schematics displayed on a nearby screen. They've implemented 17 different fail-safes on our weapon systems. 17 Emil protocol bureaucracy, she countered, but I guess that's the price of admission. Emil turned from the viewport. You don't sound convinced this is going to work. Oh, it'll work. Natalie's expression was thoughtful. Just not the way they think it will. They believe they're civilizing us, teaching us restraint and proportion. And what do you think? I think they're learning something far more important from us, which is Natalie's smile was grim that sometimes peace isn't kept by balanced responses and careful escalation. Sometimes peace is kept because everyone knows exactly what will happen if they break it. Emil considered this. You know, the ancient Romans had a saying, si vis pacem para, bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. Natalie translated exactly. The coalition species developed their protocols because they could afford to. They had time, resources, safety. They forgot what it means to fight for survival, and we're supposed to remind them. Not remind them. Compliment them. They need us. Emil, they need someone who's willing to do what they can't or won't. Natalie turned back to the viewport, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them, and maybe we need them to remind us that there are other ways to solve problems than blowing them up. Emil chuckled. Look at you getting all philosophical. Don't tell anyone I have a reputation to maintain. She straightened her uniform. Now, shall we go? Welcome our new colleagues? And explain why we absolutely positively need to keep at least a few Nova-class torpedoes in the arsenal for diplomacy's sake. Of course, Emil agreed with a straight face. Nothing says, let's be friends, quite like a judiciously applied superweapon. As they left the observation deck, Emil couldn't help but wonder what the galaxy would make of humanity in 100 years or 1,000. Would they eventually adopt the coalition's measured approach? Or would the coalition come to appreciate humanity's more direct methods? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be quite the same now that humans had arrived on the scene, and whether that was cause for celebration or concern depended entirely on which side of humanity's friendship you found yourself in the depths of uncharted space. A Kresner scout vessel observed the UNC Vigilant departing Earth orbit, its enhanced sensors cataloging the modifications made to accommodate coalition. Technology analysis complete, reported a technician to Fleet Commander Drescore. The human vessel has retained 60% of its original armament while incorporating coalition defensive systems and the Nova-class weapons still present, Commander. Though under apparent coalition oversight, protocols Drescore's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Transmit the full report to High Command, with my recommendation, which is, Commander, that the Dominion formally request admission to the coalition effective Immediately, the technician's compound eyes flickered in surprise. Sir, the Dominion has rejected Coalition membership for centuries. The Dominion had not encountered humans for centuries. Dreskor replied simply, "Tell me, technician, have you studied human history as I instructed our officers to do?" "Yes, Commander, then you know that throughout their brief but violent history, one truth has remained constant. It is far better to be humanity's ally than its enemy." The technician nodded slowly, "And if the Coalition has made humans their enforcers, then we would be fools to remain outside their protection." Dreskor turned back to the view screen, watching as the Vigilant engaged its FTL drive and vanished into the darkness of space. The humans have a saying, if you can't beat them, join them. I believe they may be the first species we've encountered who truly understands the Krezner mindset, and somewhere in the vast expanse of the galaxy, Chancellor Orm Vedra received the Krezner request. For admission to the Coalition, her crystalline form glowed with surprised yellow pulses before settling into a satisfied blue. Perhaps the humans' methods had merit after all the end.